The USS Tang was a Belau-class submarine, launched in August 1943. She was not the largest vessel in the American fleet, nor the most heavily armed. She measured just over 300 feet in length, her hull painted in dark ocean gray, her conning tower rising modestly above the waterline when she surfaced. Inside, the air was thick and warm. 87 men lived and worked in her narrow corridors, sleeping in shifts, eating simple meals, and moving through their duties with practiced efficiency. The hum of machinery was constant, a lullaby of engines, pumps, and ventilation systems that never quite stopped. You learned to sleep through it, or you didn't sleep at all. Her captain was Commander Richard O'Kane. He was 33 years old that October, with sharp eyes and a calm demeanor that inspired confidence without demanding attention. O'Kane had previously served as executive officer under the legendary Dudley "Mush" Morton aboard USS Wahoo, where he'd learned the art of aggressive submarine warfare. Now, commanding his own boat, he brought that same philosophy: strike hard, strike often, move unseen. By the autumn of 1944, Tang had already completed 4 war patrols, sinking numerous Japanese vessels. She was known as a lucky boat, a successful boat. Her crew trusted O'Kane, and O'Kane trusted his men. This trust would prove essential in the days to come. On October 10, 1944, Tang departed the submarine base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, bound for the waters around Formosa, modern-day Taiwan. Her mission was clear: patrol the busy shipping lanes used by Japanese convoys, identify targets, and sink as many enemy vessels as possible. It was a mission Tang had carried out before. But this 5th patrol would be different. The journey westward across the Pacific was long and uneventful. Days blended together in the rhythmic routine of watch schedules, maintenance checks, and silent running drills. The crew read dogged paperbacks, wrote letters they'd mail when they returned, and played quiet card games in the dim lighting of the forward torpedo room. Some men carved small objects from wood, miniature boats, crosses, keepsakes for loved ones back home. At night, when Tang surfaced to recharge her batteries and refresh the air inside, the sky above stretched vast and endless, filled with stars that seemed impossibly bright against the velvet darkness. The ocean rolled gently beneath them, whispering against the hull. On the bridge, lookouts scanned the horizon with binoculars, their silhouettes barely visible in the moonlight. Commander O'Kane often stood on the bridge during these nighttime runs, the wind pulling at his collar, salt spray misting his face. He would study the charts, consider the intelligence reports, and plan the next day's course. He knew the waters ahead were dangerous. Japanese destroyers patrolled these lanes, and enemy aircraft swept the skies. But danger was the nature of submarine warfare. You accepted it. You prepared for it. You moved forward. By late October, Tang had reached her patrol area near the northern coast of Formosa. The water here was darker, colder, and the weather had begun to shift. Clouds gathered on the horizon, and the wind picked up, creating whitecaps that danced across the surface. Below, Tang cruised at periscope depth, her electric motors humming softly, her crew waiting in silence. And then, on the afternoon of October 23rd, the lookout spotted smoke on the horizon. The hunt was about to begin. And the ocean around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Smoke on the horizon was always significant. In the vast emptiness of the Pacific, it meant only one thing: ships. And where there were ships in these waters, there was prey. Commander O'Kane ordered Tang to periscope depth. The submarine rose gently through the water, her ballast tanks adjusting with quiet precision. The periscope broke the surface, and O'Kane pressed his eye to the lens, scanning the distant gray smudge that marked the convoy's position. Through the circular view, magnified and shimmering slightly in the afternoon heat, he could make out the shapes: 3 large merchant vessels, escorted by 2 smaller warships. The convoy was moving south, hugging the coast of Formosa, likely carrying supplies, fuel, ammunition, food, to Japanese forces scattered across the Pacific Islands. O'Kane's voice was calm as he relayed the information to his executive officer. Coordinates were plotted. Speed and bearing calculated. The fire control team in the conning tower began working the targeting solution, feeding data into the torpedo data computer, a mechanical marvel that translated observations into firing angles. Tang adjusted her course, moving to intercept. The submarine remained submerged, invisible, gliding through the water like a shadow. Inside, the crew moved quietly, instinctively. Orders were given in low tones. Men checked torpedo tubes, verified settings, ensured everything was ready. The tension was not nervous or frantic. It was focused, deliberate, a kind of calm intensity born from training and experience. Hours passed. The sun began its slow descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tang closed the distance carefully, positioning herself ahead of the convoy's projected path. O'Kane wanted to attack at dusk, when visibility would be poor but still sufficient for accurate shooting. Twilight was the submarine's friend. As the light faded, Tang rose to attack depth. The periscope went up again. The convoy was closer now, the sound of its engines faintly audible through the hull, a low, steady thrum that vibrated through the water. The merchant ships were large, their hulls riding low, heavy with cargo. The escorts flanked them protectively, their crews vigilant but unaware of the predator lurking beneath the waves. O'Kane made his final calculations. He selected 2 targets, the largest freighter and one of the escorts. The torpedoes in Tang's forward tubes were Mark 18 electric models, slower than the steam-powered Mark 14s, but far quieter, leaving no telltale wake of bubbles to betray their approach. The command was given softly. Fire 1. A slight shudder ran through the submarine as the first torpedo left its tube, propelled by compressed air. Seconds later, Fire 2. Then 3. Then 4. 6 torpedoes in total, spread across 2 targets, each one programmed to run at a specific depth and angle. Now came the hardest part, waiting. The torpedoes took time to reach their targets, nearly a minute for each. Tang remained motionless, suspended in the water, listening. The crew was silent. Every man held his breath, counting the seconds in his head, imagining the sleek weapons gliding invisibly toward the enemy's ships. And then, faintly at first, the sound arrived. A deep, muffled boom, transmitted through the water like distant thunder. Then another. And another. The sonar operator confirmed, hits. The lookout reported through the periscope, flames and smoke rising from the freighter's midsection. The escort, too, was listing, its stern already sinking. O'Kane allowed himself a small smile. Good shooting, he said quietly. Tang dove deeper, slipping away into the darkening ocean, leaving chaos and fire on the surface above. And behind them, the night closed in, soft and silent. Submarine warfare was not a single dramatic moment. It was a rhythm, a patient, repetitive cycle of searching, stalking, striking, and escaping. And over the next 3 days, USS Tang would repeat this rhythm again and again. After the first attack, O'Kane ordered Tang to move away from the immediate area. Japanese destroyers would arrive soon, sweeping the water with sonar, dropping depth charges in hopes of catching the unseen attacker. The key to survival was distance and silence. Tang slipped south, running deep and slow, her electric motors barely turning, her crew moving like ghosts through the dimly lit compartments. Hours later, after the danger had passed, Tang surfaced under cover of darkness to recharge her batteries and ventilate the stale air inside. The ocean was calm, the sky overcast, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. On the bridge, the watch officer scanned the horizon while the diesels rumbled steadily, pumping fresh power into the massive battery banks below. Inside, the crew rotated through their routines. The cooks prepared simple meals, canned stew, bread, coffee that tasted faintly metallic from the submarine's distilled water. Men wrote in journals, sketched pictures, or simply lay in their bunks, staring at the curve of the hull above them, thinking of home. Commander O'Kane studied the charts in the tiny wardroom, plotting the next day's search pattern. Intelligence reports indicated more convoys would be passing through the area. Tang would find them. The following morning, October 24th, the hunt resumed. Tang cruised at periscope depth, her crew alert but patient. The sea was endless and empty, a gray-blue expanse stretching in every direction. Hours passed without contact. Then, just after noon, the radio man reported faint propeller sounds to the north. O'Kane changed course. The sound grew louder, clearer, multiple ships moving together. Tang crept closer, using the ocean's natural thermocline layers to mask her presence. When O'Kane finally raised the periscope, he saw them, another convoy, for merchant ships this time, with 3 escorts. The attack followed the same careful procedure. Tang maneuvered into position. Torpedoes were readied. The fire control solution was calculated and recalculated. And when everything was perfect, O'Kane gave the order. 6 more torpedoes left the tubes. This time, the results were even more devastating. 3 of the merchant ships were hit, their hulls torn open by the underwater explosions. One of the escorts, attempting to maneuver away, turned directly into the path of a torpedo meant for another target, a stroke of luck that O'Kane accepted without comment. Again, Tang dove and withdrew, slipping away into the depths while destruction raged above. By the evening of October 24th, Tang had sunk 5 enemy vessels in just over 30 hours. The crew was exhausted but exhilarated. They moved through their duties with quiet pride, knowing they were performing exceptionally well. O'Kane commended them, but also cautioned patience. There were still torpedoes left, and the mission was not yet complete. That night surfaced once more beneath the stars. The submarine felt smaller somehow, as if the vastness of the ocean were pressing in. The men on the bridge could hear the distant sound of waves breaking against the Formosan coast, a soft, rhythmic whisper that blended with the hum of the diesels. Commander O'Kane stood at the rail, looking east toward the dark outline of land. He knew the Japanese would be searching for them now, knew the danger was increasing. But Tang was a ghost in these waters, unseen and unstoppable. And the ocean around them kept its secrets, silent and deep. It's easy to think of submarines as machines, steel and machinery, cold and impersonal. But inside USS Tang, life continued in small, human ways that made the vessel feel almost like home. The submarine was divided into compartments, each with its own purpose. Forward was the torpedo room, where 24 torpedoes were stored in racks along the walls and loaded into the 6 forward tubes when needed. This room also served as sleeping quarters for some of the crew, who slung their hammocks between the massive weapons, rocking gently with the submarine's motion. Midship was the control room, the brain of the vessel, where depth, trim, and course were managed. Here, men sat at diving planes, adjusting the submarine's angle with small wheels, their eyes fixed on gauges that measured depth and pressure. Nearby was the radio room, where coded messages were received and decrypted, and the sonar station, where operators listened through headphones to the sounds of the ocean, the clicks of shrimp, the songs of whales, and most importantly, the propeller beats of enemy ships. Aft was the engine room, hot and loud, where the diesels roared when the submarine surfaced and the electric motors hummed when she ran submerged. The men who worked here were perpetually covered in a fine sheen of sweat and oil, their ears protected by cotton plugs against the constant noise. Throughout the submarine, the air was thick and warm. Oxygen levels dropped slowly when submerged, and by the end of a long dive, the atmosphere became heavy, almost soupy. Men moved more slowly, their breathing deliberate. When Tang surfaced and fresh air rushed through the ventilation ducts, the relief was palpable, a collective sigh that ran through the entire crew. Meals were simple but important. The galley was tiny, barely large enough for one cook to work, but he managed to produce 3 meals a day for 87 men. Breakfast might be powdered eggs and toast. Lunch, sandwiches and soup. Dinner, canned meat and vegetables served on metal trays. Coffee was always available, strong and hot, brewed continuously in a battered pot. The crew ate in shifts, sitting wherever space allowed, on bunks, on the deck, leaning against bulkheads. Conversation was quiet, punctuated by the occasional laugh or shared story. These men had been together for months, through 4 previous patrols. They knew each other's habits, moods, and quirks. They functioned as a single organism, each person's role essential to the whole. Sleep was precious and irregular. Men slept when they could, in 6-hour shifts, their bodies adapting to the submarine's rhythm rather than the natural cycle of day and night. Some could fall asleep instantly, lulled by the hum of machinery. Others lay awake, staring at the steel above them, thinking of wives, children, parents, friends. Personal space was non-existent. Privacy was a luxury no one could afford. Yet the crew respected each other's need for quiet moments. A man reading a letter from home was left alone. A man writing in his journal was given a wide berth. Small courtesies that made life tolerable. During long periods of submerged running, the submarine became a kind of cocoon, sealed, isolated, suspended in the blue-black world beneath the waves. Outside, the ocean pressed against the hull with immense force, thousands of pounds per square inch. Inside, life continued, ordinary and extraordinary at once. And through it all, Commander O'Kane moved quietly among his men, checking, observing, encouraging. He knew their names, knew their strengths. He was not distant or aloof. He was part of the crew, bound to them by the shared experience of danger and duty. And in the soft glow of the red night lights, the submarine hummed its endless lullaby. October 25th dawned gray and cool. The sky was overcast, the sea choppy with white caps driven by a steady wind from the northeast. Tang had spent the night submerged, resting at 100 feet, drifting slowly with the current. At dawn, she rose to periscope depth. Commander O'Kane scanned the horizon, searching for the telltale smudge of smoke that would indicate another convoy. For hours there was nothing, just the empty, rolling expanse of the Pacific. Then, around mid-morning, the lookout reported contact, smoke bearing northwest. O'Kane altered course immediately. Tang increased speed, her electric motors pushing her through the water at 6 knots, the maximum she could sustain without draining the batteries too quickly. The crew moved to their stations without needing orders. By now, the routine was second nature. As Tang closed the distance, the smoke resolved into shapes. Another convoy, this one smaller, 2 merchant ships and a single escort, a destroyer moving in a zigzag pattern ahead of the others. O'Kane studied the formation carefully. The destroyer was vigilant, actively sweeping the water with sonar, searching for threats. This would be more difficult. Tang would need to approach with extreme caution. The submarine slowed, moving to a crawl, her motors barely turning. She angled toward the convoy's flank, staying outside the destroyer's search pattern. The water around them was silent except for the faint hum of Tang's machinery and the distant thrum of the convoy's engines. Minutes stretched into an hour. Tang edged closer, inch by inch, her periscope breaking the surface only for brief moments, just long enough for O'Kane to take a quick bearing and then drop back down, minimizing the risk of detection. Finally, the geometry was right. Tang was positioned ahead of the convoy's path, hidden in a patch of cooler water that distorted sonar signals. O'Kane prepared to fire. This time, he chose a spread of 4 torpedoes, aimed at the 2 merchant ships. The destroyer was too dangerous to target directly. If the torpedoes missed, they'd alert the escort and bring it straight toward Tang. Better to strike the cargo vessels and withdraw before the destroyer could respond. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. The torpedoes left the tubes in quick succession, a soft whoosh of compressed air, a slight lurch as each weapon departed. Tang immediately began to descend, slipping deeper into the safety of the ocean's embrace. The crew counted silently. 30 seconds. 40. 50. Then, the unmistakable sound, explosions, two in rapid succession, transmitted through the water as deep, resonant booms that rattled the hull. The sonar operator confirmed, both merchant ships hit, both sinking. But now came the danger. The destroyer had heard the explosions and was turning, accelerating, its screws churning the water as it raced toward Tang's last known position. O'Kane ordered silent running. Every non-essential system was shut down. The crew froze in place, barely breathing. Tang drifted deeper, descending to 200 feet, then 250. Above, the destroyer's sonar pinged through the water, sharp, metallic clicks that echoed through the submarine's hull. The destroyer circled, searching. Minutes felt like hours. The crew remained motionless, eyes wide in the dim lighting, listening to the enemy prowling above them. Then, the sound of depth charges being released, a metallic clatter followed by the rush of objects falling through water. The explosions came seconds later, tremendous, bone-shaking blasts that hammered the submarine from all directions. The lights flickered. Dust rained down from the overhead pipes. Men gripped whatever they could, bracing against the shockwaves. But Tang held. Her hull, designed to withstand such punishment, remained intact. And slowly, carefully, she slipped away into the deep, silent darkness. In the quiet hours that followed the depth charge attack, as Tang drifted deep and silent, Commander Richard O'Kane sat alone in his tiny cabin, a space barely larger than a closet. The cabin contained a small desk, a fold-down bunk, and a narrow locker for his personal belongings. A single dim bulb provided light. O'Kane was exhausted. He hadn't slept more than a few hours in the past 3 days. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face stubbled with several days' growth of beard. But sleep would not come easily. His mind was too active, running through calculations, replaying the attacks, considering what lay ahead. Command of a submarine in wartime was a unique burden. Every decision he made, where to patrol, when to attack, how deep to dive, carried life-or-death consequences not just for himself but for 86 other men. There was no one to consult, no higher authority to defer to. Out here, thousands of miles from Pearl Harbor, O'Kane was entirely on his own. He thought about the ships they'd sunk. Japanese merchant vessels, yes, but crewed by men not unlike his own, sailors doing their duty, following orders, trying to survive the war. O'Kane felt no personal animosity toward them. War was not personal. It was strategic, mechanical, necessary. But still, when he closed his eyes, he could imagine those ships breaking apart, men struggling in the water, and he wondered how many had made it to lifeboats, how many had not. Such thoughts were dangerous. Dwelling on them could paralyze a commander, make him hesitant, cost lives on his own side. So O'Kane did what he'd learned to do, he compartmentalized. He acknowledged the reality of what he'd done, accepted the weight of it, and then set it aside. There would be time for reflection later, after the war. For now, there was only the mission. A soft knock on the door frame interrupted his thoughts. The executive officer entered, holding a mug of coffee. "Thought you might need this, Captain," he said quietly. O'Kane accepted it with a nod of thanks. The two men sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of the ventilation system. "How's the crew?" O'Kane asked. "Tired but holding up. Morale is good. They're proud of what we've accomplished." O'Kane sipped the coffee. It was hot and bitter, but it helped. "We still have torpedoes left," he said. "We'll continue the patrol." The executive officer nodded. He'd expected nothing less. O'Kane was not the type to return to base prematurely, not while ammunition remained and targets were available. "The men trust you, Captain," the XO said after a pause. "They know you'll get them through this." O'Kane looked up, meeting his officer's eyes. I trust them too. That's what makes this work. After the XO left, O'Kane finished his coffee and lay back on his bunk, staring at the curved steel above him. The submarine swayed gently, a slow, rhythmic motion that was almost soothing. Outside, the ocean stretched in all directions, vast and indifferent. He thought about his wife, Ernestine, back in California. He'd written her a letter before leaving Pearl Harbor, as he always did, not knowing if he'd return to mail another. In it, he told her about the ordinary things, missing her cooking, looking forward to a quiet evening at home, hoping the war would end soon. He hadn't mentioned the danger. There was no point worrying her. O'Kane closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, reluctantly, but eventually it arrived. And the submarine continued its silent glide through the darkness. As the sun set on October 24th, USS Tang prepared for what would become the final hunt of her extraordinary patrol. By now, the crew had been at sea for 2 weeks, and the strain was beginning to show, not in discipline or performance, but in the small signs that accumulated, the extra heaviness in men's eyes, the slower movements, the way conversations trailed off into silence more quickly than before. Tang had expended most of her torpedoes. 24 had been loaded at Pearl Harbor. Now, only 8 remained, 4 in the forward tubes, 4 in the aft. Commander O'Kane knew this would be the last opportunity to engage enemy shipping before returning to base. He intended to make it count. The submarine surfaced after dark, running on diesel engines to recharge the batteries. The night was clear, the stars brilliant overhead, scattered across the black canvas of the sky like grains of salt. The air was cool and fresh, a welcome relief after hours of breathing the recycled atmosphere below. On the bridge, O'Kane stood with his lookouts, scanning the horizon through binoculars. The ocean was calm, the swells long and gentle, rocking the submarine in a slow, steady rhythm. Somewhere out there, he knew, another convoy would be moving through the darkness, trying to reach its destination before dawn. Around midnight, the radar operator reported a contact, multiple ships, bearing northeast, distance approximately 15 miles. O'Kane ordered Tang to intercept, running on the surface at full speed, the diesels roaring, white foam streaming from the bow. As they closed the distance, the shapes emerged from the darkness, a convoy of at least 5 ships, moving in 2 columns, with escort vessels visible on the flanks. This was a significant target, likely carrying critical supplies to Japanese forces in the Philippines. O'Kane decided on a surface attack. Tang would approach under cover of darkness, using her low profile and black paint to remain invisible until the last possible moment. It was more dangerous than a submerged attack. There was no option to dive quickly if things went wrong, but it allowed for faster maneuvering and better visibility. The submarine closed to within 2,000 yards. Through the binoculars, O'Kane could make out details now, the silhouettes of cargo ships, the smaller shapes of escorts, even the faint glow of lights from the convoy's bridge windows. He passed the order to the forward torpedo room, prepared to fire. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, even though their bodies ached with fatigue. Torpedoes were checked one final time. Settings were verified. The tube's outer doors were opened, exposing the weapons to the sea. Tang adjusted her angle, lining up the shot. The convoy was moving slowly, perhaps 8 knots, unaware of the predator stalking them from the darkness. O'Kane chose his targets carefully. The 2 largest merchant ships in the convoy, both clearly visible against the starlit horizon. Fire 1. A slight jolt as the torpedo left its tube, the compressed air hissing, the weapons sliding into the water with barely a splash. Fire 2. Another departure, smooth and quiet. Then 3 and 4, a full spread aimed at the 2 targets. Tang immediately turned hard to port, bringing her stern tubes to bear. 2 more torpedoes were fired at a 3rd target, an escort vessel that had begun to react, its searchlights suddenly blazing to life, sweeping across the water. The night erupted in fire and thunder. The first merchant ship was struck amidships, a brilliant orange explosion that lit up the sky. The second took 2 hits in rapid succession, breaking her back, her bow and stern rising as the middle sank. The escort, too, was hit, listing heavily. But now chaos. Other escorts were turning, racing toward Tang's position, their guns firing. And in the darkness, the ocean seemed to hold its breath, waiting. What happened next would become one of the most tragic moments in submarine warfare history. But in the moment itself, aboard USS Tang, there was no sense of the disaster approaching, only the urgent focus of combat. 3 ships were sinking or badly damaged. The convoy was in disarray, escorts racing in multiple directions, searchlights sweeping the water, trying to locate the attacker. Tang was still on the surface, engines at full power, attempting to withdraw from the immediate area. Commander O'Kane made a decision. They would fire the remaining 2 stern torpedoes at another target before diving. There were ships still afloat, and Tang had come too far to leave ammunition unused. The submarine turned, bringing her stern toward a cargo vessel approximately 1,500 yards distant. The fire control solution was calculated quickly, too quickly, perhaps, given the confusion and darkness. "Fire 23, O'Kane ordered. The torpedo left the stern tube, its electric motor propelling it into the black water. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then, horribly, the torpedo's trajectory became visible, a phosphorescent trail in the water, not running straight but curving, arcing back toward the submarine. Someone on the bridge shouted a warning. O'Kane saw it too. The torpedo was running in a circle, malfunctioning, its guidance system failed or damaged. "All ahead full!" he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. "Left full rudder!" Tang's engine screamed, pushing the submarine forward, trying to outrun the errant weapon. But there wasn't enough time. The torpedo was too close, moving too fast. It struck Tang's stern, just below the waterline, at approximately 2:30 a.m. on October 25th. The explosion was catastrophic. The stern was blown apart, metal twisting and tearing, water rushing into the aft torpedo room and engine spaces with tremendous force. Men in those compartments died instantly, crushed by the blast or drowned in the flooding that followed. Tang began to sink immediately, her stern pulling her down, her bow rising into the air. On the bridge, O'Kane and the other officers were thrown from their feet. Alarms blared. Emergency lights flickered. O'Kane regained his footing and looked aft. The damage was catastrophic. The submarine was going down, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Abandon ship!" he shouted. "Everyone off the bridge!" Men scrambled, climbing over the rails, jumping into the water. The ocean was cold and dark, filled with debris and oil. Searchlights from the Japanese escorts were now converging on the scene, illuminating the dying submarine in harsh white light. Tang's bow rose higher, pointing toward the stars. Inside, men trapped in the forward compartments made desperate attempts to escape through the forward torpedo hatch, but the angle was too steep, the water pressure too great. Some managed to don mumps and lungs, primitive escape devices, and attempted to swim up from depths that exceeded safe limits. The submarine slipped beneath the waves stern first, dragging air and debris with her in a churning maelstrom. In less than 2 minutes she was gone, leaving only floating wreckage and swimmers struggling in the water. Of the 87 men aboard USS Tang, only 9 would survive, 8 who escaped from the forward compartment at extreme depth, defying the odds, and Commander O'Kane himself, who was rescued from the surface along with several others from the bridge. They were pulled from the water by the very Japanese escorts whose ships they had been attacking, enemies who treated them, surprisingly, with a measure of respect once they realized what Tang had accomplished. And in the silence that followed, the ocean closed over the submarine's grave, dark and deep and final. The survivors of USS Tang spent the remainder of the war in Japanese prisoner-of-war camps. The conditions were harsh, inadequate food, brutal interrogations, disease, and the constant uncertainty of survival. But they endured, sustained by the bonds they'd formed aboard the submarine, and the knowledge that they'd served with distinction. Commander Richard O'Kane was held at several camps, including the notorious Ofuna Interrogation Center and later at Aomori, near Tokyo. Despite the hardships, he maintained his dignity and leadership, encouraging his fellow prisoners, sharing what little they had, and never revealing more than name, rank, and serial number during interrogations. In August 1945, when the war ended with Japan's surrender, the survivors were liberated. They were gaunt, weakened, marked by their ordeal, but alive. They returned to the United States as heroes, though the full story of Tang's final patrol would take time to piece together from their testimonies and captured Japanese records. The statistics were extraordinary. In just 96 hours, 4 days, USS Tang had sunk 5 Japanese warships, an achievement unmatched by any other Allied submarine in such a short period. Over her entire service, Tang was credited with sinking 33 enemy ships totaling over 116,000 tons, making her one of the most successful submarines of the war. For his leadership and courage, Commander O'Kane was awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States' highest military decoration. The citation praised his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, and his valiant fighting spirit. O'Kane accepted the medal humbly, insisting that the true heroes were the men who had died aboard Tang, men whose courage and sacrifice would never be fully recognized. The loss of 78 crew members was a profound tragedy. Each man left behind family, friends, unrealized dreams. Their names are inscribed on memorials, remembered in ceremonies, honored by those who understand the cost of submarine warfare. In the decades following the war, O'Kane wrote about his experiences, determined to ensure that the story of Tang and her crew would not be forgotten. His memoir, Clear the Bridge, became a classic of naval literature, offering a vivid, honest account of submarine combat. He remained close with the other survivors, attending reunions, maintaining correspondence, sharing the bond that only those who have faced death together can truly understand. They grew old together, watching the world change, watching new wars come and go, always remembering the 4 days in October 1944 when they were young and invincible and the ocean was their battlefield. USS Tang herself lies on the ocean floor, approximately 180 feet below the surface, northeast of Formosa. She is a war grave, protected by international law, a place where the remains of 78 sailors rest in eternal darkness. Divers have located the wreck, photographed it, documented it, but they do not disturb it. It is hallowed ground. In 1951, a new submarine was commissioned and given the name USS Tang, a Guppy-class vessel that would serve with distinction through the Cold War. She carried the legacy of her predecessor, a reminder of sacrifice and excellence. Today, the story of USS Tang is taught at the Naval Academy, studied by submarine officers, remembered by historians. It represents both the extraordinary capability of submarine warfare and the profound risks involved. It's a story of technology and tactics, yes, but more fundamentally, it's a story of human beings, their courage, their vulnerability, their capacity for both achievement and tragedy. And somewhere in the depths of the Pacific, Tang remains, silent and still, a monument to those who served. As you lie here now, drifting towards sleep, consider for a moment the nature of submarine warfare, what it demanded of those who practiced it, what it revealed about human nature. It was, in many ways, the most lonely form of combat. Unlike soldiers in trenches who fought alongside comrades, visible to one another, or pilots who flew in formation, submariners operated in isolation, sealed inside steel tubes beneath an alien environment. The enemy was often invisible, known only through the sounds transmitted through water, propeller beats, hull creaks, the distant thunder of depth charges. There was no glory in it, not in the traditional sense. No cavalry charges, no flags waving, no cheering crowds. Just patient hunting in the dark, calculations made with mechanical instruments, and the cold mathematics of angles and distances. Victory was measured in tonnage sunk, in enemy supplies that never reached their destination, in incremental contributions to a vast, sprawling war effort that stretched across the entire Pacific. Yet for all its mechanical nature, submarine warfare required profound human qualities. Patience, certainly, the ability to wait hours or even days for the right moment. Courage, obviously, every dive carried the risk that the submarine might not surface again. But also trust, perhaps most importantly. Trust between captain and crew, trust in the technology, trust in training, trust that when the moment came, everyone would perform their role perfectly. The men who served on submarines were volunteers. No one was forced into this duty. They chose it, knowing the risks, understanding that survival was never guaranteed. Some were drawn by the adventure, others by the challenge, still others by a simple sense of duty. But all shared a certain temperament, an ability to function in confined spaces, to accept discomfort, to maintain focus through long periods of monotony punctuated by moments of intense danger. Life aboard a submarine stripped away many of the usual markers of military hierarchy. In such close quarters, pretense was impossible. Officers and enlisted men saw each other at their worst, exhausted, frightened, seasick, homesick. Respect had to be earned through competence and character, not merely demanded through rank. The psychological toll was significant. After patrols, men often struggled to readjust to normal life. They had nightmares about depth charges, about flooding compartments, about being trapped beneath the surface. Some heard phantom sonar pings in quiet moments. Others found they couldn't tolerate enclosed spaces anymore, developing claustrophobia even though they'd spent months in the ultimate confined environment. But there was also profound satisfaction, the knowledge that their work mattered, that each enemy ship sunk made a difference, that their skills and sacrifice were contributing to something larger than themselves. The submarine force, though small compared to other naval branches, accounted for more than half of all Japanese shipping losses during the war. It was a strategic impact far beyond their numbers. The story of USS Tang embodies all of this: the technical excellence, the human courage, the terrible risks, and ultimately, the tragedy that was always lurking beneath the surface. In 4 days, Tang's crew demonstrated what trained, determined men could accomplish. And in the final moments, when their own weapon turned against them, they demonstrated grace under the worst circumstances imaginable. Commander O'Kane, floating in the dark water, watching his submarine disappear, knowing that most of his crew was gone, what did he feel in that moment? Grief, certainly. Perhaps guilt, wondering if he could have done something differently. But also, one imagines, a certain peace. He had done his duty. His men had done theirs. They had fought well. War is full of such moments, victories intertwined with losses, achievements shadowed by sacrifice. We remember Tang not just for the ships she sank, but for the men who served aboard her, for what they endured and what they gave. And now, as you sink into sleep, imagine the ocean settling back to calm after all the violence, the stars reflecting on still water, the slow rhythm of waves against distant shores. The story is told. The watch is ended. Let yourself drift now, peacefully, into rest. And so we come to the end of this story, the tale of USS Tang and her crew, of 96 hours in October 1944 that would be remembered for generations. Close your eyes now, let the images fade, feel yourself sinking gently into comfort and warmth. The ocean is vast and quiet. The stars above are eternal. And somewhere in the deep, Tang rests peacefully, her mission complete, her story told. Sleep now. Let go of the day's tensions. Tomorrow is far away. We'll meet again in another story, another time, another gentle journey into the past. But for now, just rest. Breathe slowly, deeply, and drift away. Good night.